The Jordan Peterson meltdown continues.
Well,
and I mean
either you're a Christian or you're not.
I won't talk to you if you're a smartass.
Either you're a Christian or you're not. Which one is it?
I could be either of them, but I don't have to tell you.
You don't have to tell me. I was under the impression I was invited to talk to a Christian. Am I not talking to a Christian?
No, you were invited to.
I think everyone should look at the title of the YouTube channel. You're probably in the wrong YouTube video.
You're really quite something, you are.
Aren't I? But you're really quite nothing, right? You're not a Christian.
Okay, I'm done with him.
I repeat, I take no glee in this whatsoever. I still have a tremendous amount of respect for Jordan Peterson, and I probably always will, though he's making it harder and harder. Welcome to Liberty Lockdown. This is Clint Russell. Thank you for tuning in once again. The clip that's from, which is going very viral, is Jordan Peterson versus 20 atheists. It happened on Jubilee just yesterday. Needless to say, that clip is going very viral, and I want to be very, very clear. I take no pleasure in agreeing with a wild-eyed commie, which is almost certainly what that kid is. The phenotype of disaster. The eyes that are bulging out of his head, and he's obviously trying to ruin Jordan's life and career, and I'm sure I don't agree with him on anything politically whatsoever. However, he pinned Jordan into the corner and just beat the hell out of him. Got to be honest about what I saw there, and that's what happened. What I find most odd is that I, as a non-Christian, I would still say I'm not a Christian. I don't know. I'm working on it. I felt as if many of these instances of challenges from these 20 atheists, I would have done a better job at contending with the arguments than Jordan did. He continues to duck and dodge, and every time he's kind of pinned into a corner, he relents to demanding further clarification on definitions, some of which he has already asked for before, some of which he has already said what he is defining things as, and then he's asking for another variant by which he can kind of weasel his way out of a corner. What's most weird about all of it is that he's in the position of arguing against 20 atheists and arguing that the atheists are wrong, but he's still unwilling to take a firm position as to his own belief system. And I just don't understand this middle ground that he's trying to walk. And I find, myself being sympathetic to it because I am kind of in that position of being someone who probably leans towards Christianity, but is not a full-on believer just because of challenges of faith. And I think that's where Jordan's at, except he's just much more studious in this arena, and it should not be such a point of contention, and it ought to be something that he's very open about if he's going to be putting himself in a position of being a spokesman in defense of Christianity as opposed to atheism, which is essentially what this 20-person blitzkrieg was. So it seems to me that Jordan wants to have his cake and eat it too. He essentially does not want to be held to the standards of a Christian, but he wants to still have a largely Christian audience that listens to him day in and day out, but he doesn't take a declaratory stance one way or the other, and I just don't understand it. I can understand why, especially with that kid, why you wouldn't want to answer him directly. I wouldn't want to talk to that kid at all. But I've seen Jordan do this in other settings that were much less contentious, and he still continues to refuse to give a straight answer as to whether or not he is a believer. And I don't have a dog in that fight. If he's not a believer, that's fine. If he is a believer, that's also fine. Just tell us. Why won't you say if you are or you aren't? And in fact, it reminds me, tie into another person that I've been documenting their decline or the demise, which is James Lindsay, another guy who pretends as if he's a Christian, talks as if he's a Christian, oftentimes will make posts where he's calling upon Christian sensibilities and Christian morality, but yet doesn't appear to actually be a believer himself. And I think that's what's most off-putting to those that are in fact believers, is when someone who is not is essentially holding them to the moral standards of which they don't hold themselves because they're not a believer. It's manipulative at the end of the day. And I think people sense that. And if you're in a position of arguing the morality of Christianity in particular, and you're unwilling to be honest about your own belief system, well, then I think you've already lost the debate. You've already put yourself in a no-win position, rightfully so. I mean, you're talking about, and he actually, in another clip I'm going to play you in a second, he talks specifically about truth and how that is one of the highest Christian values or morals. But he's not being truthful because he's withholding his own personal position here. And for the life of me, I just can't understand why. Why withhold it? Just tell us. I don't think anyone would be upset if you said, I struggle with my faith. Given what he's gone through in his life, that'd be totally explicable. Like, we get it, dude. You've had a rough go of it over the past decade. You've got launched into the stratosphere of stardom and fame and everything else and adoration, and then you had a drug addiction which almost destroyed you. You had to go to Russia and get put into a coma, from what I've read, I allegedly, to get off of benzodiazepines. And then you come back, you seem to have found your footing again, so to speak. You're now trying to walk this line of being a spokesman for a religion that you will not declare your belief in or even your non-belief in. Neither. You'll give us neither.
I could be either of them, but I don't have to tell you.
You don't have to tell me. I was under the impression I was invited to talk to a Christian. Am I not talking to a Christian?
No, you were invited to.
I think everyone should look at the title of the YouTube channel. You're probably in the wrong YouTube video.
You're really quite something, you are.
Aren't I? But you're really quite nothing, right? You're not a Christian.
Okay, I'm done with him.
I just can't envision a world in which as I consider myself agnostic, I believe that there's probably a higher power, but I couldn't give you a description of it. I struggle with faith. I can't imagine a world in which I would get into this position of having to defend a religion I don't believe in, or at least I can't say that I believe in, against 20 atheists when he sounds as if he's dealing with the same challenges that many of those people in that room are, which is fair, totally fair. I think tons of people struggle with faith. They struggle with their own belief in religion. That's fair. That's understandable. That's human. That's honest. This is not that. Putting yourself up as an authoritative figure that's able to argue and debate in defense of a religion that you will not take a stance one way or the other on is just, it's a performative contradiction. Why are you doing this? Why are you putting yourself up there like that? Worse, you, as a guy who's extraordinarily capable and very, very bright, are losing to, he didn't have blue hair, but he's a blue-haired leftist. We all know the type. And you're getting your teeth kicked in by him and going viral for the worst reasons possible. Defending a thing that you don't even necessarily have a firm position on yourself. Why would you even debate something that you don't have a firm position on? Why would you put yourself up as that role? It seems as if you are a con man. And I think a lot of people are suspecting it. They're feeling it instinctually. And not just instinctually, but with evidence.
If someone like threatened my life, right, I would lie in order to be able to save my life, right? Like, I think you would do that too. You wouldn't lie to save your life?
Don't be so sure.
You wouldn't lie to save your life?
How much do you know about me? I didn't lie to save my career. I didn't lie to save my clinical practice.
Would you lie to like save your children, your mom, your dad?
I don't think lying would save them.
Can there ever be a circumstance logically that lying could save someone?
Yeah, and if you're steeped in sin, you're likely to live in circumstances like that.
There's something very odd about how he tightens his jaw up, his chin, and he juts it out like he's lecturing him. He's lecturing him from a position of seeming authority. What do you know about me? Do you know what I've gone through? Do you know what I've done? The claim being that, he sacrificed his career, and he did, and to a certain extent. He did sacrifice his medical license in Canada for the stand that he took, and there is courageous aspects of that. He also landed very much on his feet and became more wealthy and more famous and more popular and more listened to than he had ever been before. But what's particularly odd about it is that he's defending a position very fiercely that really no one can, that no one actually lives out aside from maybe Jesus. I mean, who doesn't tell a lie if it's necessary to save their child? And to then argue when an obvious counterpoint has been levied against your position that telling the truth is paramount, which is obviously a good lesson and certainly in alignment with Christian morals and Christian values. Why not just acknowledge the fact that there are levels to your principles, and a higher level of principle than telling the truth is the protection and defense of your children, of your wife? Makes perfect sense. A totally reasonable stance to take that is, when explained, completely understood by anybody who's being reasonable. But you would rather put your feet in the ground and defend a position that is not defensible. Most people, rightfully, will tell a white lie if put in a dire circumstance where it's necessitated.
And it is the case that there's like Jewish people in your attic and you're trying to protect them. Example. Would you lie to like the Nazis?
I would have done everything I bloody well could, so I wouldn't be in that situation to begin with. It's a hypothetical, and it's not answerable.
Hypotheticals?
No, I can't answer a hypothetical like that because it's far. Look,
Did you
Don't
eat today?
play games.
I'm not playing a game. I'm just asking
Yes,
if you
you
ate
are.
it.
If you present me with an intractable moral choice that's stripped of context and you back me into a corner, you're playing game. I just told you
Hypothetical.
I would do everything that I could to make sure that I'm never in that situation. By the time you've got there, you've made so many mistakes that there's nothing you can do that isn't a sin.
Being born in Nazi Germany and trying to protect people that you care about, like there could be a Jewish friend that you have and you want to protect them.
I think you should
have
just
them in
give
your
up on
attic.
that line of questioning.
Give up on just like trying to clarify your position? Because you
I
don't
did
like, are you
clarify
like
it.
uncomfortable with me asking this question? It's just a basic hypothetical. Like I could ask you.
It's just a basic
Yeah, yeah.
hypothetical
Like,
where
like
you
if you-
put Jews' lives at stake in Nazi Germany. That's just a basic hypothetical.
Obviously, you would lie in that scenario to save their life, but you're like not trying to answer this question for some reason.
Again, I'm put in the position of having to defend some college kid, which I probably despise politically, but he's right. This is a totally fair question to ask. Would you lie to defend your children? In the position of having Jewish friends or family that are in Nazi Germany in the 1940s, would you lie to protect them? The answer is yes. Say yes. No one's going to say, oh, you're not a Christian. Oh, telling the truth is not important. Just be honest. In fact, you aren't being honest by lying about being honest in a moment that you wouldn't be, if that makes sense. I know I put a lot of thoughts together in one line of explanation, but that's the truth. We would all lie, and everyone would understand why you would lie. Well, excuse me. We wouldn't all lie to protect a friend during that circumstance. Many people ratted out their friends and their family during periods like that. We learned that during 2020, when a lot of your friends and family ratted you out for not getting the jab or whatever, not wearing a mask, not social distancing. They didn't invite you to Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever holidays you celebrate. It was insane. So a lot of people put in the position of dealing with this hypothetical would just answer it truthfully, which Jordan refuses to do. What I took away from that is that I think because Jordan has been put in such a position of authority and kind of cloistered off from the rest of the world, or at least not challenged very much over the past few years, his ability to contend with legitimate arguments to counter his own beliefs has weakened. He's gotten very, very fragile, very weak at defending these arguments. And I think that's a product of his own success in a tragic way. That because he's surrounded by people that respect him so much, including myself, if I was sitting across the table from Jordan Peterson, I would struggle to be as antagonistic as these kids were to him. But these kids are thinking of themselves, I'm going to go viral, I'm going to dunk on this old guy, it's going to be great. And many of them got their wish. But it didn't have to go this way. Because Jordan, in my opinion, is capable of defending these positions. He is capable of defending Christianity if he is honest with himself. And I think that is the crux of the issue. That is the key problem that he's dealing with, is that he's not being honest with himself. And for the life of me, I cannot understand why he would argue in defense of a religion that he is still challenged by, that he is struggling with, that he is attempting to become a believer in. I believe that. I don't believe that he is a believer at this point, because if he were, many of these gotcha moments go bye-bye.
Do you believe in the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good notion of God?
What do you mean by believe?
Do you think it to be true?
That's the circular definition. What do you mean
How
when
is
you
that
say you
circular?
believe?
How is that circular?
Because you added no content to the answer by substituting the word true and believe.
I said, you think it to be true.
All right. So if
What's
you
a belief?
believe something, you stake your life on it.
I got to stop it there, because he says, do you believe in the all-knowing, all-powerful, omnipotent God? He asks for a clarification as to what does he mean as do you believe? He says, do you think it to be true? That is a definition. That is not circular reasoning. Do you think it's true? I mean, that's really what he's asking him. Once again, instead of just answering honestly, is that I'm not sure. I don't know. That would be an honest answer from Dr. Peterson. Instead, he gets into semantics and definition bargaining. It's stupid. It comes across as totally disingenuous because it is. Because he's not being honest with the audience. He's not being honest with the panelists. And he's not being honest with himself.
If
What's
you
a
believe
belief?
something, you stake your life on it.
What do you mean by that?
You live for it, and you die for it.
Okay, so you're saying that you don't believe something if you wouldn't die for it?
Not really, no.
Okay. So then,
How would you define belief? Something you say?
Can I explain? Like, I could believe it is the case that this pen exists, but if someone like threatened my life, right, I would lie in order to be able to save my life, right? Like, I think you would do that too. You wouldn't lie to save your life?
Don't be so sure.
You wouldn't lie to save your life?
How much do you know about me?
So here's one of the most interesting parts of this entire conversation is that he's being challenged on what belief means. I think because of his experience saying profundities, saying things that sound very lofty, very high order ideals of like, you don't believe in something unless you're living for it and willing to die for it. That's something that you might say to motivate a young man, but it's not actually the honest answer. Belief in things, like I believe in gravity. I'm certainly not prepared to die for it. What? I mean, this is just nonsense. And I think because he's been cloistered off from normies, he's not, or he hasn't at least been challenged on these kind of profundities that he creates, that he concocts to sound very intelligent and interesting, which he is. He just hasn't had to contend with pushback. And he's saying these catchphrases. You don't actually believe unless you are living for it and willing to die for it. Well, that's nonsense. I mean, you're basically talking about faith in religion, not the broad definition of belief, which is separate from that. And you can believe in lots of things and not be willing to die for them. I believe that my name's Clint. If someone calls me something else, I'm okay not fighting over it. I'll let that go, you know? I mean, it's just weird. It's just a weird stance to take. And I think it's really a product of just not having to deal with challengers when you're going off, you know, in your superfluous, flowery diatribes, which I love, by the way. I'm not trying to be a hater. It falls flat when you're actually dealing with genuine counterpoints, which he was.
By the time you've got there, you've made so many mistakes that there's nothing you can do that isn't a sin.
Being born in Nazi Germany and trying to protect people that you care about, like there could be a Jewish friend that you have and you want to protect them.
I think you should
have
just
them
give
in your
up on
attic.
that line of questioning.
But like, okay, again, you're not answering this hypothetical because you know it shows that you clearly would lie to save
I'm
someone's life.
answering it in
Obviously,
a
that's
manner
not what
you
truth
don't
is.
find acceptable.
Obviously, because I care about truth.
I wouldn't be in that scenario.
I mean, this kid just eats his lunch. It couldn't be more obvious. I mean, to say that, oh, I wouldn't be in that scenario, or that because you've been painted into this corner in this hypothetical that you're not willing to engage in, you're now pleading with your competitor by saying, I think you should just abandon this line of questioning. He says that verbatim. I mean, that's such an act of desperation, as opposed to just telling the fucking truth. And I think, and I've said this in prior episodes, but this is what makes Dave Smith so good at debating. He doesn't have to lie about any of these things because he just tells you what he genuinely believes, and his ideas happen to be right. So it's very easy to defend them. So he can do so publicly, time and time again, without ever getting caught up in a lie, because he's not lying. Now, he might be wrong about some things, and I might be wrong about some things too. But I never have to intentionally obfuscate my beliefs because I just get to tell the truth as I see it. And I think Jordan is in a position where he's not able to do that. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's a lane that he's decided that he needs to fill, that he's got some agent or something, some PR person who's telling him, hey, we think you're best at this. You need to stay here. Or because he works for the Daily Wire, if they're telling him, look, we're losing a lot of Christians over this whole Israel stuff, and you're our guy. So you, Matt Walsh, the other dude, we need you guys to go hard in the paint in defense of Christian values, because then we get to say, look, Daily Wire employs all of these very loud and proud Christians, when he's not one. I mean, he's a loud one, but he's not a Christian, apparently, because he's not willing to say if he is or he isn't. So I have to assume that he's not. Now, I don't want to pretend as if every single contender that sat up there and hammered him with questions just destroyed him. Many of them were amicable, and some of the answers that he gave were insightful. So it's not as if he's completely in shambles. I'm taking the segments that are the most worthy of being discussed further. But there are some good moments. In fact, there's this one girl who apparently he liked the most in terms of her questioning of him, and he invited her to do a lengthier 5-minute segment at the end. And I'm just going to show you one segment of that so we can break it down.
So we look at, again, the story of Cain and Abel, and we say, yeah, so I believe this is a meta-truth. I believe that this story is resonant throughout cultures. That is all true and dandy, and I'm sure that is some, in some way, the story was put in here for the reason, right? To tell us about, fights between brothers. Mm-hmm. But also, you can't say I do know or I don't know that this story is false or true in an ontological, historical sense, as a historical fact. Were there two people like that were specifically referenced?
Okay, I don't think that's knowable, but right. I'm not sure why it matters.
Now, setting aside the fact that she looks just like his daughter, a black version of Michaela Peterson, and maybe that's why he had a soft spot for her. But I think that she brings up the obvious questions and the questions that I have personally.
Belief in God, specifically as someone who resurrected or as someone who died for our sins, is important, right? But we have to look at, if we can interpret that as just like, you have to believe that God is a symbol of sacrifice. That is different from believing that there was an actual person named Jesus Christ who died on the cross for our sins.
True.
So if you believe one and not the other, that can be the difference between you going to hell and you going to heaven. So if we cannot make, we cannot say that we know whether or not certain historical facts in the Bible happen, even as just events, because the events matter, because again, God dying for our sins on the cross was an event. If we can't say that we know these things happened, these things did or didn't happen, this then leads us to kind of the conundrum of how do we know what we are meant to believe, what the Bible intended for us to believe, and this can be very, very important to our fate. Do you see what I'm saying?
I've got no disagreement with any of that. What sort of response do you want from that? So you pushed me beyond the limits of my knowledge.
Really?
Well, I think there's so many things you can't know. I'm struggling. I don't know the answer to the questions that you're asking.
If I can't know what's true from the Bible, how am I to establish my belief system? How am I to have faith in it? Especially when, as Jordan clarifies, much of it is poetry, much of it is history, much of it is analogy or metaphor. It's this is very challenging. And I think this is why, at the end of the day, most Christians rely on faith. And when they're put up against the wall with this line of questioning, they resort to answering, well, I have faith. I have faith that Jesus died for my sins and he is, the Son of God. For some people, that's fine. And for other people, that's not enough. It's challenging to take that leap of faith. And Jordan, without saying it explicitly, is telling you everything.
It's the case that forever, when people have been interpreting religious stories, they wrestled with exactly the question that you just described. Mm-hmm. When is it fact? When is it poetry? When is it music? When is it metaphor? When is it ritual? When is it time-bound?
But what I'm saying is that your interpretation of the Bible, if you cannot tell us, again, if these historical events happened or not, that can be the deciding factor in if someone is damned to hell for eternity, or if they go to heaven, right? So that's why
I don't concern myself so much with that particular question. Okay. that would be something that would stem more from an evangelical viewpoint. And I'm not putting that down, by the way. Mm-hmm. You're asking me a question I really can't answer.
Okay.
I'm not claiming even that my interpretations are canonically correct.
He's saying that he feels the same way I do, that he struggles with it, that you've asked me questions that I can't answer, that I don't even feel qualified to discuss. But at its core, if you're going to be debating against 20 atheists, don't you have to have an answer to that? Why would you get up there and put yourself in a position like that if you can't say, yes, it is true? If you want to argue in defense of there being a creator due to the complexity of the universe or something to that effect, that seems totally reasonable. But he's really putting himself up there as a defender of the Christian faith, of Christianity itself. And he cannot do so because he is not a believer. Because the same question she asked him, he can't answer because he is awash in doubt. And I think that's a very human position to be in. One that I think people would have sympathy for, especially given what he's gone through. If he could just be honest about it. But he can't. And he won't be. And I can't help him beyond that, other than to say, I wish I could help. And I mean that sincerely. He helped me with so much as a young man to kind of find my footing. I want nothing more than to give that favor back. And I can't, because I don't have the reach to to get to him, and I'm not sure he would listen even if I did. But I hope that he knows that there's a lot of people rooting for him, that despite the fact that this episode will be titled something like Jordan Peterson gets flatlined in debate, at the end of the day, there's no malice here. I'm rooting for the guy. I hope that he finds his faith. I hope that he finds that source of strength and belief. He seems so desperately in need of it, seeking of it even. And I think we all are, some more than others. I'm certainly on the path myself. And I think even those that have found true belief in their faith, they still are more than willing to have patience with those that are struggling, those that are trying. And at the end of the day, I think that's quintessentially a Christian value, a Christian moral even, which is something that Jordan ought to embrace. Have grace for yourself a little bit. And that might help ease the concerns, the struggle that you're dealing with. And I hope it will.
Welcome to Liberty Lockdown. Please scan your barcode. Your liberty ain't gone, but yeah, it's on hold. Where did it come from and where did it